Real-time strategy games are making a comeback, and for real this time, as 2023 turned out to be the year of delays, so it is 2024 that will become known as the True Year of RTS and RTT games. Homeworld 3 can't possibly be delayed for yet another year, so we are finally going to sail our motherships into the depths of the galaxy and experience the most atmospheric 3D space combat and storytelling game out there.
I am Fleet Command.
Will you prove yourself worthy of this honor?
Also landing in 2024 due to a delay, Manor Lords is a settlement builder and manager with a complete medieval army recruitment and unit combat system. It is an indie game whose lone creator has put every AAA game development team to shame.
Our destiny begins today.
Tempest Rising is developed by one such team, who lovingly created a mysterious universe for its cinematic single-player campaigns and perfectly balanced base building and unit combat for its skirmish and multiplayer. Every RTS fan's dream come true. This next one has no base building, but what Man of War 2 lacks in construction, it more than makes up for in historical accuracy and the sheer amount of playable modes and content that these developers have even delayed the game for. Stormgate developers, on the other hand, work tirelessly to bring to life an original universe, while trying to improve a classic PvP gameplay loop so tight it might burst out of your monitor. But who's more competent for this than ex-Blizzard devs? And what about ex-Westwood devs? They announced 9-bit armies, a bit too far, and the only classic element they're messing with is the graphic style. Here, land, air and sea units battle across player-built bases in every game mode possible. D.O.R.F. real-time strategic conflict, on the other hand, embraces the classical 2D look mixed with 3D and wears it like a badge. If RTS nostalgia had a name, it would be D.O.R.F. and it hits like a freight train, which is included in the game, by the way. A similar 2D nostalgia trip is called Dying Breed, and it mixes giant sandworms, zombies, explosive rats, walking brains, and much more with base building gameplay, unit recruitment led by a commando, and tops it all off with live action FMV sequences. Terminator Dark Fate Defiance is a more modern game, but it also features live-action cutscenes in its single-player campaign. Lack of base building is made up by a whole other gameplay layer, with unit customization, trade and travel on a global map. Another game with a global map as well as unique factions and a dieselpunk art style is Dustfront. It does have base building during combat missions with fast, all-out land and air warfare, and its developer is focused on the campaign experience. Space Gears is the opposite, as its developers are making an intricate PvP experience with minimal PvE content. There is a lot of progression and unit roster management before going into tactical combat with a small force of robots which have different attack modes. For those of you who prefer much grander scale strategic warfare with lots of production of units, Industrial Annihilation might just be the game for you. It promises construction of map-wide factories and in them small combat units as well as giant planet-destroying ones. Sanctuary Shattered Sun is a similar grand-scale RTS, but almost finished and already working, and it received an endorsement from Chris Taylor himself. It is one of the most ambitious indie projects with base building and unit counts in the thousands. Its biggest competitor in equal size and scale is no doubt Beyond All Reason, which is already playable for up to 16 players per match and being constantly upgraded and updated by dedicated developers. Multiplayer is the core gameplay mode here. Warpaws is built for much smaller scale combat and with no base building, but rather tactical maneuvering where your main resource is time. It takes you into the conflict of cats versus dogs with territory control gameplay and as much humor as possible. A game with no less humor but far more firepower is Nuke Them All. Following the same idea of time and territory, your aim is to destroy the enemy fort by slowly gathering your army, capturing key map buildings, and protecting your own HQ.
They are like 6.
Chromosome Evil 2 is a much darker shade of tactical gameplay and considerably more focused on individual soldiers. Its Lovecraftian theme is not for the faint of heart, but its gameplay of item management, survival and research is addictive. That dark theme and addictive gameplay is shared by Infection Free Zone, but with the added benefit of base building. Its apocalyptic setting offers a look at a world with few rules except survival by scavenging, teamwork and preparation. White Sands offers a similar single-player experience with an equally devastated world full of monstrous enemies. Defense of the last human encampments is paramount, so your job is not to build, but to protect with all the weapons at your disposal. This isn't much unlike when insects defend their own colony, like in the Empire of the Ants. It is not the first game with this idea, but its near photorealistic Unreal Engine graphics will put a new P in phobia for anyone who's not comfortable with these animals. Dinolords is another game with animals, prehistoric ones in this one, and misplaced in medieval times. But since it's currently more of a concept than an actual game, we should wait to see just what kind of collecting, building and combat gameplay it will really offer. Another game with no actual gameplay yet is Age of Mythology Retold, but here we at least know what gameplay to expect. Even if there is no info, will it be reimagined or remastered, and will it contain all the content from the original one? The same company is also looking to publish Age of Empires for mobile phones. I am personally not big on mobile games, but I don't want to be judging games for you anymore, and instead inform you and let you make your own mind about them.
We have but a singular purpose.
Falling Frontier is a game people are so impressed by they would write positive reviews before even playing it. This grand strategy and RTS sci-fi hybrid spans an entire solar system, and you will be both a manager and an admiral if it ever gets finished. A game you can already play by the time you watch this is Warhammer Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin. Its gameplay is based on a rock-paper-scissors system of unit counters across several quite different factions, but it has no real base building. Annihilate the Spance is wholly different, as here base building is a core mechanic, with even resource generation being done inside it as you expand your constantly rebuilding fleet of warships and try to outplay your opponent and destroy his base. This next game is browser-based, free-to-play, and it has no base building, because in Age of course your base, outside roguelike battles, is your upgraded mothership, while in them the carrier is your main ship and all the others follow its lead in single-player campaign and PvP. The Shattered Kingdom Road to Dominance is nowhere near as feature complete right now, but the short snippets of gameplay showcasing huge medieval armies clashing give hope for a very interesting game which will have settlement building once completed. A similar game designed for smaller scale medieval combat versus monsters is Cataclismo. It trades massive army-sized battles for more detailed castle building, literally block by block. Its dark atmosphere fits perfectly with waves of walking terrors. Age of Goblins also has monsters in it, but it is a far more light-hearted game, in which you will take your tribe of custom goblins on a conquest to take over the entire land. Every building and cave here is of tactical importance and offers some bonuses. A far more classical RTS with base building is Requiem Nuclear Song. It also features resource gathering and modern unit production with combat between different factions across large maps with a single-player campaign developers have been ironing out for a while now. Red Chaos The Strict Order has a similar base building style and also uses modern units with abilities in combat, but many other aspects function differently, including the use of super weapons and additional resource gathering mechanics.
No one will survive.
For those who prefer might and magic, Godsworn will scratch that itch for you with its spell-wielding heroes as well as a mix of monsters and different races from myth and legend. It is already playable and many gamers enjoyed its demo. Warchief developers skip that whole base building aspect and make you jump straight into action with instant deployment of units into battle. Spells and abilities are present and you can even customize your army in advance of battle. This pre-battle customization is also a huge feature of Broken Arrow. Here you get to experience a large-scale all-out warfare between several specialized army corps of USA and Russia on detailed maps with reinforcements and airstrikes. Hyperwar is the opposite of this in so many ways, as it has a detailed base building system with resource collection. It is made by a sole developer in the Unreal Engine, there are only cosmetic customization options, and it is set in the near future. But for a true sci-fi RTS on a grand scale, you will want to play Fragile Existence. It has space travel with a fleet of warships on the run from extermination, planned conquest in orbit, and on the ground with ships and units you can customize. Star Exodus could become a game with a similar theme if it ever moves past the concept phase. It is described to be a single-player game of exploration with starships full of crews you have to protect from menacing aliens. One more concept-only game like this is Roman Empire Wars. Besides some gameplay footage of animated legions fighting barbarians and their elephants for the glory of the Roman Empire, there isn't much else to look at or talk about. Sins of a Solar Empire 2, on the other hand, is shaping up to be a great sequel to the original real-time, almost 4x galactic conquest game, as each update brings the game closer to being feature complete. Its giant battleships and space stations are glorious to behold. An indie version of this is the game called Existence: The Outer Reach, but here you also have planet-side battles with ground units, which should become especially interesting in PvP and co-op multiplayer modes. Global Conflagration is one game whose multiplayer mode I couldn't get enough of during its playtests. The perfect mix of base building and unit production, capturing points on the map, and stellar combat balance made me even more excited for its future single player. If you don't like a capture point system, then Tactical Combat Operations Desert Storm is probably more your thing. This RTS has simple base building, no unit powers or superpowers, and relies on, as its title says, tactics over actions per minute.
This is our last chance. Our last train home.
Last Train Home is tactics on an even smaller scale, with a troop of highly trained and motivated soldiers on their way home through a mostly hostile country in shambles. The added gameplay layer of the moving train as your camp makes it even more interesting. For those who prefer a story-driven campaign in a sci-fi setting over a historical one, Stargate Timekeepers offers very similar gameplay just on alien planets. Stealth, use of drones, and other unique skills of your SG squad should make for a fun experience. Ardent Seas' renewed development is something I am really happy to report on, as this land and sea futuristic RTS captured my imagination years ago, and I would love to see it finalized, because who wouldn't want to play with seafaring motherships? Another game that is showing progress and a name change is Mythos Build and Survive. Based on myths and legends with Vikings, monsters and demons mixed in, this survival builder has combat aplenty along with exploration and resource collection. Cold Engines unfortunately hasn't shown any progress, so this multiplayer focused classic RTS set in the harshest ice and frost encrusted environments is still just smoke in the distance. But I do hope these developers will light some new fuel in their engines. A similar situation is with Middle East Crisis. Despite actually having a working game, showing off gameplay footage with both base building and modern unit combat, not much more can be seen or heard from the developers for a while now. Era 1 on the other hand just had a huge gameplay drop, and despite being behind schedule, this kickstarted 3D combat and space station builder with customizable warships is looking good. Let's hope for a playable build this year. And one game I keep seeing year after year but never really finished or published is Grimstar Crystals Are the New Oil, an ambitious project of a lone developer where your objective is to exploit alien planets as efficiently as possible despite the opposition from local wildlife. Ephemeris is also solo developed, but this sci-fi mix of real-time 3D space combat and 4X galactic conquest gameplay is progressing by leaps and bounds. Realistic spaceship movement physics, formations, and third-person flying are just some of its amazing features. Another sci-fi 3D spaceship combat game from a solo developer is Soil. An odd name for a space game, I know, but do try out the playable campaign and skirmish modes which come with a mothership, asteroid miners, research, and warship construction. Modu War also has a strange name and even stranger gameplay, as here you don't construct buildings and units but grow them. Moju is the alien creature with the ability to grow different organs, split and merge them as if they were your units. A much more classical but also cinematic RTS is Zero Space. This sci-fi super successfully kickstarted multiplayer focused title will have a storytelling campaign and a lot of factions and sub-factions to mix and match them for unique playstyles. Barkan is a game where basically nothing is unique, as its developers simply ripped off past Dune games as well as the Dune lore in everything but actual names due to copyright concerns. Other than that, it plays like the classics. Another indie game with familiar looking units and lore is Liquidation. A strong sense of Warhammer 40k and other sci-fi franchises is felt in this title, while the gameplay has been changed a few times, finally getting to a playable version.
We have encountered the enemy.
Ratten Reich might not be a classical RTS and plays more like a tactical game, but at least the lore is much more original, where rats, mice, roaches and lizards in human forms use dieselpunk and steampunk weaponry and tech against each other. To once again play in the familiar lore of Warcraft, you only need your phone. You all have one, right? I am sorry, I know that leaves a bad taste behind. Warcraft Rumble is already out and, well, yeah, that's that. Not my thing, might be yours. Neolithic First City-States is much more my thing, but it's been on a slow development road. Huge maps, different land and sea areas, and a game about real-time civilization building does tend to take a while to finish in the hands of a lone indie developer. Developers of Age of Space are similarly short-handed, and so their space sci-fi game with fun-looking spaceship combat is slow to move into the next stage of development. It also has resource management gameplay, as you can salvage wrecks of your enemies.
We shall drown our foes in a sea of blood.
Immortal Gates of Pyre has had better fortune as of late, so this dynamic, fast-paced and full-blooded base-building RTS has more progression to show in its playable version. It is not a mold-breaking game, but does attempt a special twist on hero units. This next voxel-based game borrows most of its lore and playable races from the usual myths and legends, but Heart of Myriad developers are at least trying out new ways of combining units, buildings and spells to give players a novel kind of gameplay and control systems. Iron Marine's Invasion definitely isn't your typical RTS game either, and it is after all an expanded version of a mobile game. The developers do however make a good effort to give you an extended campaign and lots of abilities and upgrades for heroes to keep things interesting.
Ready to pacify.
A game with similar but retro futuristic aesthetics that is definitely not a mobile game at its core is Space Tales. Large-scale strategic warfare and resource management with base building puts it much closer to what you would expect from a classical RTS game. Ancient Wars Medieval Crusades is one such classic, and in its setting too, as here you will have Crusaders, Mongols and other civilizations known for historical battles in 5 different game modes with not just base building but also a unit experience system. If you would rather have more novel elements in your next RTS, then take a look at the deck building system in Rogue Command, where your chosen cards represent units, factories, skills or abilities which set up synergies or make drastic changes to your army. Corsairs Battle of the Caribbean offers a novel setting for a real-time tactical game. The pirate-infested shores and waters of the warm Caribbean will get a lot more flotsam in them once your 24-pound cannons start ripping apart enemy ships.
You survived.
But there is one setting that is far more unique: Hell. This is where the story of a demonic succubus unfolds in Agony Lords of Hell. The gameplay is, as you would expect, full of fire and brimstone as you develop a city and manage your armies in combat. Arcane Wilds seems more earthly, but the presence of shamans, creatures, relics, spells, and a resource called Essence makes it just as hellish. The reinforcement system by ships and a global progression system make it play out differently than the norm. A game with no spells or the supernatural is Assembly RTS, a work of a lone indie developer who is aiming to create an immersive, physics-based strategy game with faction and unit customization in single and multiplayer. IAH Internet War is a fascinating idea from an equally talented developer about a game where you are a hacker who performs various cyber crimes with bots on the internet. Well, a highly stylized imagining of how the internet works on the backend, that is. An equally ambitious but far more classical game is Empire Eternal. This is basically a reimagining of Empire Earth and its most beloved features, especially the one where you go from a prehistoric age to the Machines Age in one sitting. Astronomics Rise of a New Empire is, well, another empire builder, just in space. This means managing planetary economies, conducting negotiations and diplomacy spiced up with espionage, and of course, fleet building and conquest. If you want a more combat-focused space game, then Zeta Leporis RTS is one you should look into and try out its playtest, building and upgrading everything from fighters to battleships as you annihilate the opposing cybernetic lifeform among asteroid fields. Drevapsina is a game similarly focused on warfare with large-scale battles. In its huge campaign, you can build up your base, train your army, and try to destroy your opponents watching the simple graphics and cute effects top-down. A smaller scale game with management beyond just combat and building is Ascent of Ashes. It is set in a post-apocalyptic dystopia where your survivors, who have unique personalities, fight raiders, aliens, and enemy soldiers. Siege of Ardor appears to be a similar game, where you design and build your village, castle, and resource collection buildings as you train your future army to defend everything from the Shadow Realm. A much more dynamic game is Operation Polygon Storm, which cuts out all the micromanagement of base building and resource collection to focus on map warfare with the objective to take out the enemy base by using the correct mix of troops and tactics.
Only a few have the guts to dance in the lion's den.
Commandos Origins is the second coming of the well-known and well-regarded king of the tactical subgenre. With just a squad of soldiers and light weapons, you're taking on the whole enemy army, which requires a lot of patience. Basically, an indie version of this is Red Glare. It too is a World War II single-player real-time tactics game focused on a shadow war between the OSS and a German secret force which landed in South America, and it is up to no good. Neuroslicers is also an indie project, but a sci-fi one, and unfortunately it hasn't found a lot of support. Developers have remade it into a different project, but I still feel bad for the original concept of two computer hacking forces meeting on a digital field of battle. Our remaster of a classic base building RTS with an advanced economy management system and medieval combat is already out. Stronghold Definitive Edition is an upgrade for the original, so new generations of RTS gamers can experience this marvel in the next decade. Warbreed is also an attempt to bring back a very old RTS game from the abandonware pile. This one featured genetic engineering and the ability to fully customize your soldiers with many types of weapons which provide thousands of unique combinations. A totally new addition to Steam's RTS lineup is World War Armies, a PvP-focused mobile port based on the concept of call-in troops, use of generals' powers, and battle over resource-generating objectives in a World War II setting.
We're under attack.
From Glory to Goo is set far in the future, where you use riflemen, cyborgs, and robots to fight off the relentless Goo, a shape-shifting lifeform which is trying to scrub your presence from this alien world you're trying to colonize.
Look who came crawling back.
With much different aesthetics and a free-to-play model, developers of Smelogs Playground want to attract you to try out their single and multiplayer game. Here units can become buildings and vice versa in a mystical and colorful Aztec world. Polygon Fantasy Battle Simulator is another recent release which is more of a sandbox experience than anything else, as it allows you to spawn and send into huge battles up to 100,000 different units. An opposite experience is going to be Shattered Lands, where you lead a far smaller number of units, more like heroes from both top-down and third-person perspective, while still having base building and resource collection in the game. Night is Coming is much darker than that, with survival, combat and building set in a fantasy world inspired by Slavic mythology and Carpathian mystique, full of monsters and terrors in the night. Settlers are individuals, weather is another enemy, and heroes will be put to the test. Now, before I go to a few juicy rumors about highly anticipated RTS games, let me tell you about games that will soon, or already, depending on when you watch this video, have an expansion, big DLC or their content finalized and should offer good replay value in 2024.
The eyes of the world are upon you.
The Liberation DLC is coming to Call to Arms Gates of Hell Ostfront, and it introduces the Western Front battles of 1944 featuring the US faction as well as Germany's Western Front for both single and multiplayer modes. Retro Commander, the free RTS with expansive base building and resource collection, big maps as well as land, air and sea combat gameplay, has had its campaign finished as well as many skirmish maps. Newest game mixing RTS and FPS elements, Silica added air units to its large maps and vehicular combat. Playing as the commander from a top-down perspective or as a grunt with sand in your eyes, now you will have more options for fun. Five Nations, the old-school type of an RTS, received the Renegades expansion, which brings new skirmish maps, heroes, units and their abilities, new stations to build, tech to research, as well as a whole new sector and faction with an enhanced AI to battle against. A similar expansion has been released for Starship Troopers Terran Command, titled Raising Hell. Mercenary units are in the spotlight here with their own special abilities, but there are new single-player missions as well. Two Age of Empires games got new content added to them recently. Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition was the first with the Mountain Royals, adding 2 new civilizations and 3 campaigns. While Age of Empires 4 got the Sultan Ascend expansion with a similar amount of content, the Japanese and Byzantine civilizations and 1 extra campaign set in the Middle East as the expansion title would suggest. Dune Spice Wars has finally been completed, with the addition of a new faction, multiplayer, air and sand units, and a single-player conquest mode. It might lean into the 4x gameplay, but that is a small price to pay to enjoy the Dune universe at your fingertips. A game which plays much more like an old-school RTS, but with wave survival and settlement building gameplay at its heart, is Diplomacy is Not an Option, and it too gained a lot of new features and gameplay modes worth playing. TFC The Fertile Crescent is that 100% old classic base building and unit combat RTS down to its graphics and art design, but thankfully with many quality of life additions modern games should come with in 2024. One more game that tries to blend FPS and RTS elements is Executive Assault 2. Here you build bases in space and mine resources to be able to construct robots and ships which you can control in first person to fight alongside and against other players. Several more honorable mentions from both mini and larger indie developers include Nebulous Fleet Command and Nordguard with their constant upgrades and updates to content and gameplay, as well as Cepheus Protocol, 2089 Space Divided, Line War and Empires of the Undergrowth, which all show continual progress to gameplay, performance and playable content, making them much better player experiences if you're returning to them or just discovering them in 2024. In my next video, I will give you a much more in-depth look at many of the games on this list, with exclusive new footage I captured or received directly from their developers, as well as all the relevant and up-to-date news on their release dates, content and gameplay. I know you have certainly noticed that in this video list I have shown far more games than in previous years, and that is because I took my personal filter down to its lowest setting, removing only scams, totally fake games or asset flips. I made the decision to let you be the judge of these real-time strategy games and also to give more exposure to indie developers who are already struggling to get their games noticed by the gaming public. In addition to that, and because of my many conversations with you, my viewers and fellow gamers, as well as developers, I have also decided to expand the scope of what I consider to be a real-time strategy game. This is something I will talk about directly in my upcoming video on what is the definition of an RTS game. If you are wondering where are games like Total War Pharaoh or Company of Heroes 3 on this expanded list, well, in my opinion, they and their developers have a lot more work ahead of them to deserve a place on it after disappointing their audience. Simple as that. But if you do not agree, tell me why in the comments. Now, some of the games that we all would love to see a sequel of, or at least an announcement about them made this year, are the next Star Wars RTS, a stronghold game in the Unreal Engine, as well as potential for Warcraft 4 or StarCraft 3 now that Blizzard is under new management from Microsoft. Of these, the most substantial rumor is the one about a Star Wars RTS probably in development and production by Respawn Entertainment under Electronic Arts. This would make it the first proper RTS published by EA in who knows how long, and a shock to me if I'm being honest. In case you think I should have mentioned any other game or project in development which you just discovered or is already close to your heart, please tell me so in the comments below. Thank you for watching and happy gaming!